Hi, everyone.
Hello. Anyone out there?
Okay. Up on the stool, how was lunch? Is everyone energized? Ready for the afternoon? No afternoon slump over here. Thank you so much. My name is Emma Hinchliffe. I'm a senior writer with Fortune. I co-chair our Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit and write our newsletter, Most Powerful Women Daily. It used to be called The Broadsheet. So thank you so much for being here. And we have a great group of panelists to chime in on topics on all of these themes. So I'd love to start with quick introductions and kind of a state of the union. So if you all could introduce yourself, keep it quick, one sentence, and tell us where you think we are in terms of gender diversity in the workplace right now. Your quick take, and then we'll come back to get into all those themes.
That's not a quick take.
Yeah. Well, your micro version of that, and then we'll dive back in.
Okay. Hi all, I am Laura Russert, and I am the head of executive engagement at BetterUp. I don't have a quick take on where we are on gender disparity that I can give to you right now, but I'm really excited about this conversation. Oh wait, my quick take is we all have a lot of work to do. So, see, I got it. You got me there.
Exactly.
And you had time to prep.
Good afternoon, I'm Matt Jackson. I am the GM for Unmind here in the Americas. We're a workplace mental health platform. I don't think I have a quick take either, and I would echo we have more to do. I do come from an interesting background of working in the mental health space where it is heavily weighted towards female versus male ratio, so perhaps a different perspective today, as well as being the only man on the panel as well.
That's right. We should have positioned you here,
right.
But your position right there. Hi, everyone. I'm Anita Jivani. I'm the Global Head of Innovation at Avanade, which is an Accenture and Microsoft joint venture firm. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having us on the panel. My quick take is that we're at a breaking point. We're at a very, very unique moment, and I'm so excited to get into it, But I think we're at a breaking point.
Thank you, Anita. It's tough to follow Anita. I'm Toni Handler, and I am with Dentsu, which is an advertising company. It's the number 3 in the world, and I'm the deputy CHRO. And it's great to be here, and I would say, similar to what my colleagues have said, I feel like we have made some progress, and we're going forward, not backwards.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Lisa Moore. I'm the Chief People Officer at Yahoo. I've been with the company for 10 years. Kind of said it all already. There was some progress, pandemic, we're picking ourselves up. We've had a lot of learnings over the last several decades. It's what we now do with those learnings. I think people in this room, in our roles, that can really influence outcomes for the future. So I think it is a real pivotal moment right now.
Okay. Important. Well, let's start there. Anita, you said we're at this kind of breaking point. So what is that breaking point? What's this important moment?
Yeah, well, already we know there's no equality anywhere. So we can kind of acknowledge that, right? We're all moving toward equality, but we haven't gotten to equality. Why I think it's a breaking point is because AI is what everyone's talking about. Not many people are talking about the role of gender in AI. So women are less likely to play in the sandbox of AI. They're less likely, three times less likely to put their hand up for proactive training as it relates to AI. Only 20% of leaders in AI are women. So you can see the direction we're going in. Same concept as compounding interest. Slowly, the 10% becomes 20, et cetera. We know in about 10 years, 90% of jobs are going to be impacted by AI. So if that's the case, and we're not playing around personally and professionally as women in the space, we're already lagging. And so there's a big kind of moment and a reckoning that both women, leaders, and organizations can think about whether we want to proactively acknowledge and address this challenging moment that we're at.
Okay, so for you, AI is the real pivotal moment. Sorry, Toni, please go ahead.
Emma, the other thing I would add is I just read a UN article, a report actually, that talked about women and men and the gender pay gap, that it's going to take 300 years for us, 300 years, not 30 years, 300 years to actually close the gender pay gap. There's obviously things companies are doing and organizations are doing around that, but that is frightening to think about that.
Yeah, important points, and we can come back and dive more into the pay gap and AI. So, Anita, for you, AI is like this pivotal moment. Lisa, you kind of alluded to a few other pivotal moments of the past few years that are kind of a fork in the road. So what have you noticed if you're thinking about something other than AI?
I think what we've seen is a generally encouraging trend over the last few decades, right? And so C-suite, right? We know that 10, 15 years ago, that there was around a 17, 18% representation of women, and that's now more like 28. Actually, at Yahoo, it's 50. So I'm very proud of that. However, we've got to really unpick how do women get into senior ranks, right? And what are the obstacles to getting there? And I think it's really important that we don't kid ourselves that it's all about AI. There are some really deeply entrenched and systemic reasons why there aren't more women in the C-suite. And one of those is gender bias and stereotypes, right? We think we know what a C-suite person looks like. And what I'll tell you, I overheard only a couple of days ago, a couple of men, I would put them in their late 20s, crossing Park Avenue, evidently having some trouble in their dating lives, and one saying to the other, you have to understand that in New York City, there's this feeling amongst women that they need to be the breadwinner, and literally it came with air quotes. And I say that just to offer up that even the young men around us, right, or young people around us are still holding on to some of these stereotypes. And so we've really got to go back to looking at what effective leadership looks like, and it doesn't look like one thing. There are a lot of different strands to a leadership skill set today, and they don't all look like one thing. And so I think it's really a case, that's why I call it kind of like a moment right now. We can take the learnings we've had from the last few decades, impacted even more so by the pandemic, look at who's in the workplace, who's missing, and then go after those who are missing from the C-suite.
Yeah, that's a really interesting anecdote. And I think goes counter to the trend that things are just automatically going to get better. You look at all the research points to a growing, not a narrowing gender gap between young men and young women in a lot of ways, especially in politics. So an interesting theme to dive into. But you mentioned the pandemic and its impact on women. For Lisa or for anyone else who has followed this closely, what impact did the pandemic have on women leaders now that we're a few years out? What have you seen?
I can jump in first. So it's been really interesting, and a lot of what you're talking about right now, women wanting to be the breadwinners. So what does that look like in the workplace, right? What does that look like for women? So since the pandemic, productivity has increased notably every year for women leaders, which is probably why these poor men in their 20s with their broken hearts feel that way. And I'm going to assume they're brokenhearted too, because why else would you say such a thing? And so with that increase, what else might have also increased? Burnout. And so since the pandemic, every year since, burnout has increased for women. Now, what we've seen is that is not the case for men. So men have started to rebound in terms of burnout and work-life balance. And so when I say that we still have more work to do, we still have more work to do because there is so much that women have to do. There's so much that we're talking about in these different roles that they have to fulfill, and they want to maintain productivity. They have to maintain productivity to get to that next level. But at what cost? And that's the work that we have to continue to do.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the why there? Why is it that burnout has continued to increase for women, while it has plateaued for men?
So we have some hypotheses, different hypotheses. There are, of course, different reasons for different people. One hypothesis is that men have given themselves more grace. And what we see through coaching is that when women leaders have coaches, they are able to improve and grow in their self-compassion, which ultimately leads to stronger work-life balance and some of these other key outcomes. And so that is one key difference that we've seen. Then there's another one that we were all talking about in the green room, which is women still hold a majority of the housework responsibilities. And that is a lot of work, and when being forced back into the office, as many women are, as many people are, not only women, as many people are being forced back into the office, that limits your ability to multitask. So I shared with them, and we all agreed, I am not the only one who throws in laundry into the washing machine in between meetings. It's not an active task. It's not taking away from my presence at work and my ability to be productive. But it is helping me after work not have to stay at home and do laundry, right? So what happens when you take away that flexibility from women who have a majority of the household work? So those are a couple of the themes that we're seeing in our data. But I know this entire group has a perspective on this exact question.
I think that there's a couple of fundamental things that we talk about burnout, we talk about stress, we talk about how many people bounce back from that. Organizations are still going through that shift of needing or starting to focus on preventative and proactive tools, be that employee resource groups that people can relate to and address mental health proactively, preventatively in a way that they relate to, wherever that resource group is. There could be tools as well to help people from a coaching perspective, right? So if it's an accessibility question, as a business, are you providing the right tools and are they easily found by anyone in that company? And I think we mentioned AI. AI has the potential to democratize access to resources or anything that is otherwise unavailable to people right now, across all genders. And then I think the other part is leadership. So you talked about at the C-suite level, I learned a phrase, not one that I coined in case it offends anyone in the room, but when working with the legal industry and focusing on well-being, there was a stale, pale male layer at the top of law firms that prevented a focus on well-being, mental health. Not my phrase, just quoting. And I think across leadership, the majority of leaders, forgive me, I don't know the data, but are men. Now, I grew up with 4 older sisters, so I wouldn't admit to know exactly what goes on or how you feel or how you relate from being a woman in the workplace. But there are things that you can coach leaders on, be it compassionate leadership. There's vendors in this room that provide compassionate leadership training, empathetic leadership training. Nobody does it. Like, think about each year, you have to do data privacy, data protection, or your IT director is chasing you, telling you you're out of compliance. Why aren't they chasing you for your compassion training, your empathetic leadership training? I think there's some systemic things and that organizations can do to support this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. And to the return to office example, obviously that's a very big conversation. I mean, I think many corporate leaders would argue that it's just kind of the way it is and it's something to accept, and it's unlikely that ship will be turned around in the vast majority of major companies. But I'm curious, do you all see any strategies to maintain some of the flexibility that has benefited women over the past few years, while acknowledging that return to office is likely going to continue?
I mean, this is a win-win-win, right? This isn't just about benefiting women. We know from data that any underrepresented group in the workplace expresses now a preference to be able to exercise flexibility and work from home with some degree of discretion for them. Just show of hands, who has flexible working available to them right now? That's huge. That's incredible and super encouraging. I think one of the obstacles generally in this space is the unconscious bias that we have. And one bias that we have, but generally is held, again, apologies amongst the group that was just mentioned, is that being in an office makes you more productive. That is categorically false.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Wonderful. Being in an office might make you feel more engaged because you're seeing other humans and you're having human connectivity. And of course, we all need that. We need to channel that. But not necessarily so that I can do a better work output. Yahoo's always been very dispersed geographically, globally, as well as within the US. And so any calls I would have been on prior to the pandemic, there are a bunch of video screens and people in other rooms dialing in. When RTO came around the first time, because there was a big drive and then there was the Delta variant and everybody took the foot off the gas, phew, we don't have to make a decision about it. But everything that was pushing to get back in the office was driven by this unconscious bias held by people who had already capitalized on their career by spending decades in the workplace with a kind of adulation aura around them. They sat in an office and lots of people looked at them and they loved that. And they went to go on corporate trips and, we've all read about this stuff. But it's bias that is telling us that that's the way to do it. And so the win-win-win now, and for all of you, whatever your role is just being aware of that bias to get back into an office and have the open discussion about really what's driving us to say that that is a better outcome, because it benefits women and other groups to retain the flexibility to be able to be yourself truly in your sweats at home, whenever you choose. You can still work super productively.
Yeah. So when you see major developments in this space, like for instance Amazon's recent 5-day-a-week announcement, what do you think is driving that? Do you think there's something missing there? Yeah, please, Lisa.
I believe my hypothesis is that they want people to leave.
I also think they're spending a fortune.
Yeah, Toni, aren't you?
So I was at Amazon for a few years before coming to my current company. Amazon has a very strong footprint in terms of building space. So if I look at the comparison of where I am now, during the pandemic in the Americas, Dentsu had 91 or 92 offices. During the pandemic, over the last 3 to 4 years, we made the conscious decision, we don't care. We're seeing productivity stay good and maybe even better. Client engagement is strong. Net promoter scores with our clients are strong. Office utilization is obviously down. So we're going to cut office space. So we now have 31 or 32 offices in the US and Canada and 5 markets in LATAM when I look at just the Americas. And that was a conscious decision that we made because we decided to move to hybrid work, not remote. So we're not fully remote like some companies, but we allow the flexibility because, to the point, Lisa, that you made, there are some things that you do want people to come into the office for. There are some things that work better in person, whether it's team building, whether it's problem solving over a challenge, whether it's onboarding new employees, whether it's a live training event. Remember those days when you went to live training? And over the years, it's become all virtual. How nice is it to now still have the option to have both available to you?
Mm-hmm. And if I can just chime into this, I think corporations don't exist in a silo. So there is this broader, loneliness epidemic that the U.S. Surgeon General has talked about. And we see that the more days that people work from home, even though they believe there's a well-being associated with that, positively correlated, actually they feel more lonely and less connected. And there is a broader issue, which I'm sure everyone knows about, kind of the Gallup research and engagement. We have massively disengaged employee populations. And a lot of that disengagement is because of the lack of water cooler conversations and connections, or the lack of that effort when we're on Zoom, right? And so how do we strike this balance of productivity, engagement, and loneliness in a way that's not counterintuitive? Because as you mentioned, Lisa, being in the office is not the most productive thing. So how do we kind of strike the balance? I mean, I think hybrid work is a very nice thing where people have to come in a specific days of the week or a certain quarter, everyone comes together. There is so much value in person, right? But how do we find the best of both?
And one of the other things, I'm sorry to chime in again, because I just thought of something. Lisa, you brought a great point up about bias. And I happen to be an introvert. People tend to think because I'm in HR and I work with people all the time, I'm an extrovert. One of the things that COVID taught me was I love working from home because I can have everything around me to look at my notes and still look prepared in meetings without being like, oh my God, what do I say next? Because I'm not an extrovert. So it's also a bias about different ways of working, your different personality styles, your different leadership styles. So it's not just biases around, people of color, or if I'm a man, or if I'm a woman, or if I'm older, or if I'm younger. It's all different kinds of diverse perspectives.
Yeah, and of course we can have a whole panel just about return to office, but of course this is the Women in the Workplace panel, so I'm curious, Lisa, to your point about, potentially Amazon wants people to leave, I'm wondering if you could add a gender lens to that. So if that's the case for Amazon or any other company, what does that mean then if the people who leave are women?
Well, to the aforementioned point, right, that flexible working is most valuable to underrepresented groups, and women would be included in that. And I think in the pandemic, there were several studies done around how much salary you would actually forego in order to retain flexibility. Amazon hasn't taken any notice of that. And my theory, I don't hate Amazon, but my theory is born out of this. We know that many companies really tried to not lay folks off in the pandemic. At the time, we were actually owned by Verizon, and there was nobody let go in the whole of 110,000 employees at Verizon. So kudos to Verizon. But that did then result in a post-pandemic bloat.
Yeah.
Then we had the great resignation in 2022 when you tried to hang on to everybody lest they scarper off to other companies. And Amazon was a big hoover up of employees in that era. And guess what? Now financial indicators are not so strong. And so they have to move people out. And if one lever that has people deciding whether to stay or go is flexibility, it's one way of saying, under the guise of productivity is driven by being in an office, we're going to say we're going to centralize the work back into the office. And it works. They don't then have to pay severance, right? So there's very much a calculated strategy available to companies veering back towards flexible working. And to the point, it's going to impact those groups that are really now saying, I know I can be productive from home. I know I don't have to be in an office and sit outside my boss's office all day till they leave and then I can go home. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to choose that any longer. And so the choice that people are exercising is going to be disproportionately felt, I think, within those groups that unfortunately are the groups we actually want to retain in the workforce.
Yeah, and I want to add just like a quick little point to that too, a little +1, as we would say. In our research, what we find too is that when we force people to return to work, we're not offering them what they need to balance out the loss of flexibility. So if we are forcing people to return to work, offering better childcare could be a great solve for that. Because, you know, if you offer a parent childcare, they might actually be very excited to go back to work. I don't know. And so we just have to think about, like, if we're going to remove this flexibility that they have right now at home, how are we going to make it up if we want them back in the office? And what we see in our data is that working parents, and this isn't gender specific, this is broadly working parents, are the most impacted by these types of forced return to work. So it's just really important that if you are instituting a policy as such, you have in place the resources to help people return to work.
Yeah. Are there any other levers or innovative strategies that any of you are seeing alongside childcare?
I would also offer to really where Laura was going, right? That trends in talent management come and go, just like parenting trends, right? And there was a phase where HR and leadership was required to put everything on the table to make employees happy so they stayed. So there was free food and there were funky workspaces and lots of support, leaves and other kinds of platforms for mental health support, inclusion training, etc. And that has ebbed away in favor of now a talent strategy. A desirable talent strategy is more aimed at accountability and driving results because of the economic cycle that we're in and the turn that has been made there. And so we are seeing, budgets being cut in some of the areas that provide these fantastic features of the workplace that were put in place initially to try to harness what then was a really powerful inclusion driving tool. And so again, we can either go along with that wave or we can try to then deliberately counter some of what is happening with trends and insist on retaining some of these pieces. Otherwise, again, we're going to see the numbers go in the wrong direction.
It's a moving target because in 5 years not 5, I don't know what, but the boomers are going to be in Turks and Caicos and the geriatric millennials, someone used that term earlier today, so I'm stealing it, they become kind of the leaders. It's all going to shift because then, they're going to be coming in as analysts, right? The whole leadership structure is going to change, right? Half of middle management will be people who started onboarding during COVID. They don't even understand the concept of working in person. The next generation, they are more oriented toward values and they care about skills more than, what Ivy League school you went to. It's a totally different game. So I think just when we figure it out, it's going to all change again, right? And so, don't write it in pen because it's going to shift.
So how do you prepare? How do you future-proof for that?
I mean, I think it's a lot of understanding and kind of persona empathy around that generation. I think right now there's a lot of eye rolling across all generations, and a lot of like, we don't talk about generations, like old, young people are very hesitant to talk about that for some reason. There's an eye rolling at the baby boomers of like, this is how it's been, this is how it's going to be. There's an eye rolling of like, just get on the flight to Turks and Caicos, you need to get out of here. Kind of, it's across the board. I mean, I think again, to come back to hybrid, I think the strategy for talent is going to be a hybrid strategy based on that specific team. I think company-wide mandates are just too broad. Like Amazon saying everybody return to work or someone saying I'm fully remote is very difficult. If my manager doesn't come in and says, doesn't really matter, don't worry about it, totally different my day-to-day. So policies and guidelines are one thing, day-to-day is a lot more important, and the research shows that happiness and retention is connected to your ability to connect to your manager. So I think that manager level is going to play a critical role.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, you brought us to a great topic, the kind of unprecedented diversity of age in the workforce right now. For anyone else, what are you seeing? Are you seeing, obviously there's a lot of talk about Gen Z, and a lot of pressure on employers to, in one way, meet the expectations of Gen Z, but also in another ways, you said kind of some eye rolling about rejecting some of those expectations. So where are you seeing this all land? What are employers taking about Gen Z and what are they kind of pushing back on?
So we were talking earlier about the McKinsey, they released it in September, the McKinsey Women in Leadership Report in partnership with the Lean In organization, which painted the picture pretty much as we described, that there has been some progress, not enough. But interestingly, the progress has been slower for representation in those emerging layers of the workplace, right? And so now we are talking to Gen Z and we're looking to female identifying people in the Gen Z group and thinking, okay, what do they want from a job? And it is for sure not the same thing that I had to accept when I was growing up in a job. I mean, I live with 3 Gen Zers and every day I'm the recipient of what they've been journaling as far as how they feel today. And how they feel today is going to have a direct impact on how productive they can be in their job today. So I think we can't roll our eyes, right? What we need to understand is every generation rolls its eyes at 2 generations lower than where it was. Gen Z brings a lot of counter behaviors, if you will, to the Gen Xers, and probably they're making me a better, more empathetic leader, actually. You know, I'm from the keep calm and carry on, particularly the English version of that, right? So we hopefully can harness from them, listen to them, not jump to conclusions, just like you would with anybody, but with Gen Z, if we don't harness Gen Z in terms of our, really, really listening to what they are wanting from a career. We were even talking earlier about how Gen Z is or the younger end of Gen Z is gonna arrive in the workplace. Today, are kids gonna go through college? Are they gonna finish college degrees? Do they need to do that? We've got to challenge ourselves around whether that's even something that should be put out as an entry threshold into the workplace. Because there's an awful lot that you can learn through life without going to college as well.
I think just a big +1 on the British thing as well, on mental health. But to your point around your Gen Z household, people entering the workforce now have a much higher expectation of the culture that you create and that you provide for them and the environment. So for so long, we've been able to ignore that because driving people to the point of burnout has led to hitting the numbers that you need to hit. But now we have a big enough generation coming in who says, no, I don't like that. I don't want that. I'm going to talk with my feet. I'm going to go elsewhere. So all of a sudden, the finance team are looking at the cost of attrition, the inability to retain key talent. And guess what? Guess who knows AI better than anyone else? Gen Z. Right, so it's whether you like it or not, whether you agree, whether you eye roll, organizations have to do something about it now to create the right culture for people.
And do you see any gender differences across Gen Z in terms of employee expectations?
Only the fact that they identify very differently from the way we used to. So again, I would hesitate to really lead with a binary lens and just again think about everybody as individuals. I think in this space, again as leaders, when we think about getting tactical, Yahoo's going to start doing, in the next couple of months, intergenerational workshops Yahoo was born decades ago. We have people working for us who've worked for us for 30 years. The original Yahoo Mail platform engineers, right? So how do they relate to these incoming crew who can learn an awful lot from each other, actually, rather than considering the longer tenured employees kind of over the hill, you can now really connect them and reinvigorate them. And I've seen that happening with new skills. So you're then having almost double value from your tenured employees, as well as providing mentors and coaches for the younger folks. And then, again, I think just thinking about emerging careers and not taking our eye off the ball, especially in tougher macroeconomic conditions. Interns, for example, traditionally a very big entry point into the tech companies and many companies, right? Budgets kind of being pulled back from that. But instead, think about this as a longer term engagement, right? Maybe you're not promising the intern a job next year, but you're starting to form a relationship with somebody coming through college or out of high school. Yahoo's building instead a strategy much more around community of that group and connectivity over many years, rather than just an internship next summer and trying to hire you immediately after. Because this group, to your point, like their bar for trust is so much higher. You've really got to demonstrate over a longer period of time that you're who you say you are. And just having values on a wall is not going to cut it for them. So we've got to really prove ourselves in a completely different way to this new generation.
Yeah. What about on an individual level when you talk about this generation and the manager responsibility to support career growth for their employees? Are you seeing managers do that well? Are there areas where you think the senior level and employer level should step in and help managers do that better? I don't know who has thoughts on that.
I think the managers are in a really difficult sandwich generation. I mean, we talk about that at personally, right? Like people are in a sandwich generation, having kids and aging parents. I think managers are in a similar, more complicated, less supported version of that at work. They're told to, manage stakeholder expectations of the executives, at the same time pass down messages that they don't believe in. And by the way, like give feedback once a month. Someone said that they give feedback to each manager once a month. I mean, that's a lot to put on a manager who's probably also in the sandwich generation in their personal life. And so I think the best investment we could do is actually invest more in managers for overall P&L outcomes and outcomes for the next generation. But I think we have this tendency to focus on younger generations and then leaders, and we leave this, the beef patty out of the sandwich, if that makes sense. I don't know, I was going with the sandwich.
I like the beef patty.
Yeah.
And what we see in our data is that this beef patty, the middle managers, now we're going to sound like a McDonald's commercial. They really are experiencing a higher level of burden and stress than other managers. So frontline managers truly are experiencing all of this. And I think that before they can help any of the other generations, like they need help. They actually need help unblocking and creating the space so that they can provide that support. And that's not to say that they should not also be engaging in improving their inclusive behaviors so that they can be more inclusive leaders and really spend that time with their direct reports, but they need the time. And that's a big part of what we're seeing right now, is that they don't have the time, and they need the time to learn the skills and to also engage in those behaviors.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of women leave the workplace at about that manager level.
Toni, I saw you nodding. Did you have?
Yeah, leadership for me and for our company is really key. We see it as a key differentiator for our talent. It makes people want to stay and be engaged depending on the people you work with, and a leader is important to the day-to-day of an employee. So for us, it's back to your question, Emma, it's very varied in terms of the capabilities of our managers. Some are good, and some are good because they instinctually have the skills to be an emotionally intelligent leader and also have the financial capability to manage P&L, et cetera. But we have found that we've had to provide more training because most of our leaders have come up through the ranks, whether they were a copywriter or selling media space. They necessarily may not have been a person that were taught the skills on how to lead others. So we have actually had to put a curriculum in place. Now we've had to morph it to be more virtual because most of our people are hybrid, to enable our leaders. In fact, we just we brought back a program that we had developed 20 years ago in our Tokyo headquarters to allow people to have interface with our C-suite, which many of them tend to be still in Tokyo for our company. And it will allow the cultural differences between the East versus West, because obviously there are clear different ways of working.
Yeah.
On the training point, someone mentioned live trainings before. Remember them? Like in the education, you got to think about the delivery of how we're trying to train people now. And it's, I guess, another plug for AI in that we've gone from traditional live training, where you take days out of your week to go and do it, to virtual training where you take hours out of your day, and we're all time poor, managers more so than most. To the TikTok generation where it's snappier information and short, sharp bursts, because that's how we absorb information, because we've got the attention span of goldfish for the generational thing. To now AI can actually take it to an even more conversational level about when I need something, exactly what I need as I need it. And it could be you are on the train into the office and you're about to have a hard performance conversation with someone in your team. I'm going to role play it with AI. If it's a specific coach that has been trained in the right way. And guess what? It can do it in 50 different languages. So it's kind of, if you think about training in that way, it's not such a hard task to get to the right training to the right people, which is promising.
Yeah, so we have that capability now. It's like you were doing a commercial for you. And it's really blending the science of behavior change, AI, and the human component to it, right? And so like he said, you can actually engage in these like on-the-spot coaching moments, and it's a scalable solution. So of course, we all want that personal coach that we can, talk to in person, but that's not usually scalable for a really big company. So really leaning on AI to help us get these skills trainings more broadly is really important.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Before we run out of time, I want to make sure we have a moment to talk about, you mentioned this moment when a lot of mid-level managers leave the workforce. Of course, that also ties back into parental leave and the employee experience there. What does a good experience of an employee returning to the office after a parental leave look like, and what does a bad experience look like? How can a company and managers create a positive experience of reintegration into an employee's job?
Definitely don't have enough time for us to go into it now because it's a big topic, but if I may just kind of soapbox for 30 seconds before passing on. Being British, we're used to wonderful maternity policies at a governmental level in the UK. And one of the systemic problems that the US has for organizations is how do you overcome the belief that 12 weeks is enough time to give birth to a human being to come back to the office to complete your full responsibility as an employee. You're expected to carry that human for 9 months and work up until the point you give birth, but get back to the office after 12 weeks or we're not paying you is absurd. So there's a problem there that companies need to overcome, and we as an organization have consistent policies for maternity globally from our UK headquarters. So if you're a US employee, you get UK maternity leave, which is fantastic, and in my mind, the bare minimum. One really cool thing that I learned when re-onboarding an employee recently was the 20% contract. So it's very difficult. You have a new persona, a new identity as a working mother when you come back into the workplace. And that's very, very difficult. And then all of a sudden, you've got to do 100% of your job straight away. What we did is we looked at what does 20% of your job look like, and trust me, the other 80% will get done. But tell me what that 20% is. And then each week you check in, you see how we're doing, and you add incremental percentage points up until you're at the point where you're doing 100% of your job. And it's just a much better way psychologically to re-onboard, but then also it shows that you care as an employer at the time that matters most to that person coming back to the office.
Yeah.
Told you didn't, sorry.
No, thank you so much. So I guess before we finish up, if everyone could just kind of share one thing that everyone in this room can do to improve the experience of their female employees when they go back to work. If you can do another round robin really fast.
I'll go first. Actually, I think I'll turn the clock back to when they first disclose to you that they need to take a leave. And in this case, the leave is to have a baby. Managers can sometimes freak out with that and they don't know how to react and they're really trying to be encouraging, but the default if they just said to their employee, if you're going to be half as good a mother as you are an employee, this is going to be a lucky kid. And just take the emotion out of that, like super stressful first, because that sets the scene then for we want to support you through the journey and then coming back in and tie the pieces together at the other end so that they really feel like, yes, I feel fully supported.
Yeah. That's amazing. Well, I actually don't think we have time for everyone to share their next thoughts. But find our panelists afterwards, and hopefully they can answer that question for you. So thank you so much.